Okay, so welcome back. Um, on the last session, we have talked about a few assumptions on of the digital sharing economy, right? So we have explained to you the nature of how the sharing economy business model works, and also some of the assumptions on which the digital sharing economy business models operate, right? And so today, let's start the conversation as a continuation of the sharing economy business model. And I told you the last day that we will talk about a few examples pertaining to the sharing economy business model. So there are several types of popular business models that you can observe within the sharing economy that have been classified in this table shown here. So here we have indicated to you four different types of business models that we commonly observe in the digital sharing economy, right? So the first type is portals offering access to content, right? So what type of content, what type of portals, and what does portals in general mean? Portals actually refer to sort of a gateway. It is a sort of a gateway which provides you an entry point, or which provides you access to a large base of a collection of information of different types, right? Now, this Yahoo, for instance, is a portal which provides you access to a multitude of content, such as information on, current news, sports, entertainment, then even things like astrology, right? And a lot of such information, right? So now in the sharing economy also we find portals which offer you access to content, right? Some examples have been provided here. P2P. P2P P2P means peer to peer, right? There are peer to peer networks. There are so many, right? For example, here Napster has been listed. I don't know whether you have heard of Napster. Actually, this peer to peer technology basically began with Napster back in 1999 as a method for users to share MP3 files or digital music over the internet, right? And then when it comes to the present context, it has evolved up to a lot more familiar brand names to you, such as the iTunes Music Store, Spotify, Wikipedia, and GitHub, right? So I will share with you a small video clip on what is a peer-to-peer network, right?
You may have recently seen people talking about peer-to-peer on the internet. But what is peer-to-peer? Peer-to-peer is a way of communicating directly between two parties, with no third parties in between. For example, normally, if Ben wants to send a message to Kylie over the internet, the message leaves his device and is pushed to a server. Then the server sends a message to Kylie's device. Using peer-to-peer communication, the message goes straight from Ben's device to Kylie's device, just like a conversation in real life. Once a connection is established between two devices, each device works as its own server and receiver, allowing messages to travel uninterrupted. The first well-known use of peer-to-peer technology was Napster. Napster allowed you to make files on your computer available for other users to directly download. This is significant because it allowed each person to be a digital library for sharing. Since then, Bitcoin was created and gave new life to peer-to-peer systems. Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency without a central bank that can be sent from user to user on the peer-to-peer network, just like cash in real life. So, why does this matter? Well, when data gets sent to a central server, it can be monitored, stored for later use, sold to third parties, or stolen by criminals. One of the big benefits of peer-to-peer is how you get to control your data. As a user of the internet, you have a right to your data, but when you use services that require a central server, your data is theirs. While most platforms let you download and view your data, where that data goes and how it's stored is in their control, which means they might also sell it. Peer-to-peer lets you take full control of who sees your data, where your info goes, and how it's used. With no third party holding your data, the power is in your hands. Peer-to-peer also helps ensure security. Since your data is stored on your device, criminals can't exploit a server to get your info. With the help of decentralization and encryption, a user has even more security and independence than ever before. The internet was created with free information and global connection at its core. As a user of the internet, you can choose which platforms you support with your data and time. Centralized systems might use your data and time for their own benefit. A centralized system makes it much harder for startups, creators, and other groups to grow their internet presence without worrying about the
Right. So that was a small explanation on how peer-to-peer works and what is a peer-to-peer network. I think now the explanation is more clearer to you, and the idea of these portals which offer access to internet makes more clearer sense to you now. So the second type of sharing economy business model is applications for cooperation with the customer, right? So what types of applications are we talking about here? Examples have been given: Toyota Europe, Twitter, and IBM X-Force Exchange. I'm pretty sure you are familiar with the Twitter platform here, but also for you to understand the concept better, let me share with you another website so that you have a clearer idea of how and what other types of such applications are in place within the sharing economy business model for providing cooperation to the customer, for cooperating with the customer in essence. So let's take a look at this Toyota Europe site. Right, let me share my screen. Now, here you see this is the toyotaeurope.com website. Now, this is said to have been put together or developed for the purpose of providing connecting with the customer in different ways, right? So here you can see, if you refer to these tabs, how they are built to interact with customers in different ways and also to provide customer support in different ways, right? So if you have time, you can refer to these websites like this and get yourself familiar with what they stand for and what their functionality is. Now, for instance, you can see here, as a consumer, they have the privilege of accessing a lot of information regarding Toyota cars and the story behind their production and the entire Toyota system, so to speak, right? And also, in addition, there are certain consumer touch points offered through these websites where you can even apply for vacancies, and you actually can even create your own tailored brochures, right? So if you refer to this section of this website, there are 159 vehicles that they say will fit our preference or our demographic, so to speak, right? And if they do not satisfy you, you can add your own filters, right? The type of car, the number of doors, what type of CO2 emission you are looking for, the fuel consumption in 100 kilometers, the luggage capacity, number of seats. Likewise, there are so many filters or preferences that you can select from, right? And when you filter out these things, they will show you a set of cars that are most suitable for your type of preference, right? So when you have some time, do go through these sites and see how they are built to provide convenience to consumers in terms of uh, providing cooperation. And also you can have a look at this IBM Xforce exchange as well, so that you understand the concept of how these things work better. Then we also have another type, platforms that associate transaction partners, right? So these types of sharing economy models are basically platforms, right? Platforms which provide certain services to consumers with the association of certain transaction partners. Now, in the earlier diagram which we showed you the previous week, you saw how the sharing economy platforms work, right? How there's a service provider, there is a consumer, right? Can you remember here? And also there is a service enabler. So when it comes to this third type of circular economy business models, it's basically such a platform which associates a transaction partner in order to deliver a particular service to consumers, right? Now, here some familiar names for you are also given, such as Uber and Airbnb, but in addition you find this BlaBlaCar, Lyft, Get.com and Thingo.pl. They are very popular such platforms that are available in a worldwide setting, right? So this BlaBlaCar, for instance, um, you know, I will show you a small video regarding the BlaBlaCar so that you understand how it works, right? Um, it's actually based on this concept of carpooling, right? I don't know whether you are familiar with that concept. So when you see the video, it will be more familiar to you, or maybe you will understand it better. In Sri Lanka also there are certain
You've been there on
that are in place to introduce this concept. I saw recently Pitney trying to introduce this concept, and certain marketing campaigns they have launched to launch concepts that are similar to that of BlaBlaCar. So watch this video so that you're more familiar with it.
You've been there on a long distance journey in your car. It's very expensive and really not good for the environment. Alex chose a different way to travel with BlaBlaCar. It's a lot more fun, environmentally friendly, and he saves a lot of money by sharing his travel costs.
Hi, I'm Alex. I use BlaBlaCar to share my city-to-city car journeys with other people. If you're traveling by car, like me, you just publish the date and details of your trip on BlaBlaCar. The app automatically calculates a fair contribution per person. Kate is a designer, her husband Tom is an architect, and Rahul is a software engineer. All three wanted to do the same trip, but their options were limited, especially at the last minute. Instead of taking a train or a bus, they used BlaBlaCar, did a simple search for their journey, chose me, and requested to share my ride. I checked their profiles and agreed. They enjoyed the comfort of my car, and I shared my travel expenses. During the trip, we had a fun chat. After the ride, we all gave each other ratings to build our reputation on BlaBlaCar.
BlaBlaCar, the trusted ride-sharing community.
Right. So that is how BlaBlaCar works, where you have the ability of carpooling, right? Sharing your ride with other partners. So like I mentioned, in Sri Lanka, there will be sometimes initiatives like this introduced in the future, as I told you earlier regarding PickMe. So when you have time, do go through these other examples that we have provided also, so that you get an idea about what sort of platforms that are there available to provide the services of this type of sharing economy business model. Then also the fourth type, sharing resources designated for this purpose, a particular purpose, right? So here, nextbike.pl, car sharing, Avis, Hertz, Volney Auto, .pl have been given. I'm pretty sure many of you might not be familiar with most of these brands or most of these examples. So let me share with you, for instance, how this next bike works, or let's say what its purpose is, right? Right. So it's a Polish website. Just translated it to English. So you see what is this made for, right? So what is next bike about? So it is something to do with cycling, of course, as the name itself suggests, right? Um, so they provide, right, bike rental services, right? So that when you have any requirement to go from a point A to B, right, they provide you with the facility of downloading this particular application from App Store, from website, and you have your own login, and using your app, you have the facility of renting bikes in any city in the world where Next Bike operates, right? So as the steps here suggest, you can select the city that you're located in, and then you can use a particular map to locate the bike that is most convenient for you, maybe the bike that is the closest for you to access. Then there's a particular scan to code, and you can provide the details of your itinerary, and you have the facility of moving from place to place, right? So if you refer to different categories in this site, you will see where it is based and how it operates, right? So these are new concepts, right? New concepts that have been introduced due to the sharing economy. These types of concepts were not in operation earlier in the regular economy, the linear economies, the traditional economy that we know of, right? So when you observe these kinds of business models, you see what types of possibilities there are out there in the world for generating revenue and providing value propositions to customers, right? So here you see, for instance, this particular service is present in 300 cities around the world, right? So this is where the world is heading towards. So when you have time, do go through these sites and see what you can learn more regarding the sharing economy and new business models, right? So those are a few of the examples that I wanted to share with you regarding sharing economy business models. Then moving ahead, we move to circular business models. This is also a new concept that has been introduced in the new economies that we talk about, right? So what is a circular economy? The first point says circular economy is currently one of the key areas of development on both macroeconomic and organizational levels, right? So it is a concept that is getting popular and popular all around the world, right? And its main concern being built upon the environment, right? So basically, in a circular economy, the second point says that it should be considered in systemic terms. So what do you mean by systemic terms? So this is an approach, according to the third point, an approach that can be used to achieve certain goals that a business has, goals which are particularly focused on, or goals that are particularly based on efficient use of resources, right? As a business, if your goals are turned towards how to use the resources that you use for your manufacturing and other business processes in an efficient way, right? While taking into account your organization's life cycle, right? And also your organization's business model, then you are ideally uh, using a systemic approach, right? So, in a systemic approach, we say that businesses also analyze the stages in the life cycle, as the third point mentioned, of the product or the process that your business is mainly focusing on. There may be certain stages in its life cycle, right, from the point of origin to the point of um, consumption, and even after, until the point of disposal, right? The entire life cycle is being considered, right? So systemic approach entails such elements. So in the circular economy, ideally you look at things in a systemic approach, right? So one thing it focuses on is the efficient use of resources, then also the life cycle of an organization, right? Assessment of the life cycle. So when you talk about life cycle assessment, what is it? It is a tool for analyzing the environmental burden associated with products at all stages of their life cycle. Like I mentioned earlier, for example, if you are in a manufacturing industry, right? If your business manufactures products, if you're doing a life cycle assessment, you have to be able to analyze the environmental impact of your production during all stages of its life cycle. What are the stages? From resource extraction through the production of materials, parts of products, and the product itself, and the usage of the product to management after rejection through reuse, recycling, or disposal. So within brackets, we have mentioned the word from cradle to the grave, right? From the point of birth or from the point of origin to the point of disposal. All the stages that come in between account as the life cycle of a product, right? So in the circular economy, we consider this entire life cycle of the product that your organization manufactures, right? So from the point of obtaining resources that are necessary for producing your product, while the production is happening, while certain parts are being assembled and they are being produced, right? And also what happens after the product is consumed, and what happens after the product is manufactured, what about the disposals, and what is the environmental impact of this entire cycle, right? So the life cycle assessment talks about or tries to analyze the impact that the manufacturing of this product has on the environment throughout the entire stages of this life cycle, right? In a sense, in other words, I can also say that in a circular economy, manufacturers try to design products as much as possible to be reusable. For example, they might try to produce electrical devices, right, which are designed in a way that makes it easier to repair, right? So products and raw materials are reused as much as possible. For example, recycling plastic into pellets for making newer plastic products, right? So these are some of the concepts attached with the organizations that are working or that are attached to circular economy or circular business models, right? So the circular economy, it is said that the circular economy integrates social, economic, as well as natural aspects at every level of management within organization. Within every level of management, the social, economic, and natural aspects that are relevant to the business or the type of operation that the business conducts are being considered, right? At every level of management, at micro level, meso level, and macro level. So what do you mean by the micro level? What do you mean by the micro level? For example, if I tell you at the micro level, businesses consider things such as creation of eco designs, right? Eco products. We talk about eco-friendly products, for example, right? And we talk about how waste minimization can happen, introduction of environmental management systems, right? These things are discussed or considered at the micro level. Then when it comes to the second stage, the meso level talks about things such as creation of industrial eco parks, right? Industrial eco parks. So what is an industrial eco park? Maybe some of you have heard also. It is actually a kind of a community, right? Community of businesses actually. So what is the purpose of this community of businesses? Or let's say what sort of a background does this community of businesses have? Now these types of industrial eco parks or this community of businesses, they are located on a common property, right? On a common property where each organization is looking to achieve enhanced performance while paying attention to environmental, economic, and social aspects, right? All three of them, not just economic or social impacts. Also, the organizations or businesses in this community focus a lot on the environment as well, right? So via certain collaborations that they have in managing environmental issues and resource issues, they operate together, right? So there are so many such eco parks in the global context, right? You can just do a search and see what types of eco parks are there, right? And the processes that they use to manage their waste or the byproducts and even to recycle, right? And as an industry, how they have processes in place to operate in such a way that the processes of one organization becomes the raw materials of another, or the disposals of one organization or byproducts becomes the raw materials for another, right? Things like that. Interesting concepts are present in these concepts of industrial eco parks, and they have interesting ways of managing resources and trying to use resources in a more sustainable way, and to manage and to conduct businesses in a sustainable way, right? Then moving ahead to the macro level, right? The macro level. So what are the considerations at the macro level? You move one step further from the meso level. Now for instance, the creation of industrial eco parks, you go to the creation of eco cities, eco municipalities, eco regions, right? So eco cities is a larger concept to the eco industry, industrial eco park, right? Not just a collection of businesses, but entire cities, right? Eco cities. Then certain municipalities, we talk about municipal councils in Sri Lanka, right? So there are such municipalities which are maintained in an eco-friendly manner, and also eco regions, right? So what is an eco city that we consider under this macro level? Let me share a small video clip so that the concept would be clearer to you. This is also built around the concept where people in a city are working towards sustainable practices altogether, right? The sustainability is the main concern. So watch this video that you have a clearer understanding of it.
There's enough evidence now to show that we're not living sustainably. We're now living in the urban age.
Eco-cities are cities that are taking decisive and creative action to meet the great economic, social and ecological challenges of our time.
This is not a slow aspiration. We're in crisis. We're in a planetary crisis, and we need to move quickly towards a more sustainable form of urbanisation.
We can't solve this problem one light bulb at a time. The creation of eco-cities, of safe climate cities, resilient cities, zero carbon cities, that's going to require really strong and courageous leadership by governments and by working in close partnership with households and communities and businesses.
The challenge is urgent, particularly for those cities on the front line of climate change. The Eco-City, this is not a misty-eyed ideal. This is something real, something concrete. The Eco-City Summit is about generating answers and accumulating wisdom to address these challenges facing our world in 2017 and beyond.
Right. So that was about the concept of eco-cities. Now,
For a long time, urban growth knew no bounds.
so rather than hosting or creating say promoting cities that are excessively consuming resources, causing a lot of environmental damage and causing a lot of harmful disposals to the environment, this concept of eco cities is built around the fact that cities can actually be made in a more sustainable manner, right? So our neighboring country India, for example, right, it has also embraced this concept of eco cities. This city called Surat in India, for instance, right? You can check that up on the internet. They are also in a quest to becoming an eco city, right? Also called the Diamond City in India, right? So like the eco cities you find in Singapore, the concept such as eco cities found in Singapore, India also is following in the same footprints, right? And it has also been selected as one of the 3 cities in the world for a demonstration project on a eco city, right? So you can see the developments that have happened since then, right? There are many attempts worldwide to promote this concept of eco cities and to develop and expand more and more eco cities. For example, there are examples in Singapore, like I told, and in China, right? You can Google these things and learn about how circular economy concepts are implemented in such places. So the circular economy aims to separate wealth from resource use. That means it tries to answer the question of how we can consume goods and services and not depend on the extraction of primary resources, and thus ensure closed loops, which will prevent the possible storage of used goods in landfills. In a circular economy, essentially what they try to answer is how goods can be used, how certain goods can be consumed, right? Not only goods, even services, how can they be consumed without depending on the extraction of resources excessively, and ensuring closed loops. That means without having to dispose of certain products to the environment, without causing byproducts to the environment, causing landfills or say pollution, for instance, right? Having closed loops is what the circular economy business models try to focus on, right? In a circular economy, business tries to aim to minimize the consumption and also on the other hand to reduce waste, right? Those are the two main emphasis that circular economy business models have. And while minimizing resource consumption and while reducing wastage, they also try to maximize the value that can be created to the stakeholders by operating within many closed loops as possible, right? Without having loose ends or without having open ends where you have to put a certain byproduct of your business out into the environment, right? It's a closed loop without any opens within the business cycle, without having to produce any byproducts, without having to cause damage or pollution in the environment. They try as much as possible to close the loop and try to consume, reuse and reuse as much as possible by reducing waste, right? So the circular economy proposes a system in which reuse and recycling ensure substitutes for the use of primary raw materials, right? Like I mentioned earlier, rather than again and again trying to consume resources, right? They try to promote systems of reusing and recycling. By limiting our dependence on such resources, it improves our ability and the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So, this is somewhat closer to the concept of sustainability also, if you think of it. So by reducing our over dependence on resources and extraction of resources to produce goods and services, it tries to promote to increase the ability of the present generation as well as the future generations to meet their needs, right? So no one of our needs will be curtailed or blocked away, right? Trying to fulfill the needs of the present generation as well as the future. The circular economy increases the likelihood of the full use of sustainable development, right? Like I mentioned earlier, by following circular economy business practices, you are trying to essentially promote sustainable development, right? අපි කියන්නේ තිරසාර සංවර්ධනය කියලානේ. In the circular economy, growth is separated from the use of limited resources by destructive technology and business models based on longevity, sustainability, reuse, repair, modernization, renewal, capacity sharing, and dematerialization. So, in the circular economy, we focus on several popular concepts such as longevity, right? Longer consumption of products and services, right? Not trying to dispose of products soon. Then sustainability, then reusing of products and services, repairing rather than disposing, repair rather than disposing, reuse the products, right? Then modernization of products and services, renewal, right? And capacity sharing and even dematerialization, that is ideally reducing the material consumption in the production processes, for instance, right? So for example, for dematerialization, we can take the example of how people transition from CDs and DVDs, right? Physical CDs and DVDs, and also physical newspapers, to digital products such as MP3s and mobile applications, right? So you are absolutely trying to reduce the quantity of materials that are being used for a production process and therefore reduce the quantity of waste that is being generated by these processes within this concept of dematerialization, right? So these are some popular concepts that we talk about a lot in the circular business models, and businesses who are promoting this idea try to run their businesses by these concepts that we talked about, such as longevity, sustainability, reusing, repairing, modernization. Now, modernization, what sort of examples can you think about? For instance, for some of you, it might be a new concept. That is why I'm talking about this. Now, for example, agri-modernization programs are there. What happens there is people in the agriculture industry, for instance, they try to introduce more modernized ways of cultivating and more modernized ways of using fertilizer on crops, such that they do not damage the soil or they do not harm the environment, right? Modernized irrigation projects, so that a lot of harvest can be yielded by without using a lot of water, by using only essential quantities of water and not using chemical or harmful fertilizer, right? Focusing on maybe organic fertilizer, and even using systems such as drip irrigation, for instance, right? So these are some of the modernization concepts that have been introduced in the agri sector. So there are so many new such modernization concepts that are arising in many different industries if you look into, right? So all these concepts, they try to reduce the damage or harm caused to the environment, right? Then moving on, so now what essentially is a circular business model? We talked about certain features of the circular business model. Now here the definition provided has been given by Linde and Williander, right? So they tell that a circular business model is a business model in which the conceptual logic for value creation is based on utilizing the economic value retained in products after use in the production of new offerings, right? You try to harness the value retained within certain products even after they have been used or even after they have been consumed to produce, in order to produce new offerings, new products from the same products, right? So also the Board of Innovation talks about circular business models as a circular business model articulates the logic of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value to its broad range of stakeholders while minimizing ecological and social costs, right? So you can see from both these definitions the concept that they are trying to create value without having any loose ends to damage the environment. We are talking about closed loops where the value in even products that have ended its consumption period can be used to create more value or to create different types of values and different types of product offerings, right? And also how an organization can create and deliver and capture value while being mindful about the ecological cost and the social cost that they are having as a business, right? So moving ahead, circular business models have proven that they can be potentially be consistent with economic performance, right? In fact, they can contribute to competitiveness by lowering production costs. So one might think, now having overemphasis on the environment, can this business survive? Can these businesses sustain themselves? Can profitability be impacted? Actually, no, right? So evidence suggests that when you are more concerned about the environment, when you are more concerned about these concepts of reusing, dematerialization, and when you're sharing your resources with other businesses, and concepts like that are promoted, you can significantly lower your production costs, right? Significant lowering of production costs leads to you still being an economic enterprise, so that your economic performance will be positively impacted, right? And the third point says more ambitiously, they can generate additional turnover, right? Additional income can be created by penetrating new markets and winning new customers, as well as protecting the corporation against the volatility of raw material prices in traditional markets. Now, when you are promoting the reuse of products and creating new offerings from the value retained in already consumed products, you can offer these products to new markets, new demographics, new customer groups, so that you can generate more and more revenue even after the life cycle of products, even after the consumption of products, right? And also, when you are so engaged in these concepts of recycling and reusing and such, you can remain yourself safe from the volatility, or let's say the heavy changes that happen in the raw material prices in traditional markets, right? So Lobsher and Marinelli have identified 6 key areas for the integration of the circular economy with the business model. So these are 6 ways how the concept of circular economy can be combined with business models, right? So one area is the sales model, right? Sales model. What happens here? Transition from selling the volume of products to selling services, and recovery of products from customers after their first life, right? After the consumption of the products is already over, these types of organization will try to recover these products or promote customers to bring those products back for maybe recycling, right? In order to process them for different types of other value propositions, right? For example, this plastic is being sometimes plastic products, right, are being promoted to be used in this way. Then product design or material composition. What happens here? The change involves the design method and product design to maximize the reuse of the product, its components, and high quality materials, right? By sometimes using product designs that are in place to maximize the reuse of the product, and also by employing high quality materials, this concept of circular economy can be promoted. Now, in this regard, for instance, there are many practices that businesses can follow, right? For instance, when we talk about this material composition, right, there are materials that have criticalness attached to them because of their less availability to satisfy the resource requirement of the people, right? So there are critical materials. So when designing certain products, right, there are initiatives in place where these critical materials are used less, and they are trying to replace with less critical materials, and also trying to reduce the use of such critical materials in designing your products. For instance, now this happens when designing things like batteries, right? Certain elements certain elements are being used to produce the batteries, which are in a critical situation in terms of their availability, right? So there is a trend to shift towards battery designs with lower consumption of, for example, cobalt, the element called cobalt, right? So that you can reduce the criticality or the criticality risk of using such materials which you do not find in abundance, or which are regarded to as critical materials, right? So there are many such initiatives in place in the world like that. When ideally you are trying to design a product, you are always trying to concentrate on how you can improve the design and how you can change its material composition so that you are not damaging the environment, right? And sometimes you can design products in such a way that it can be easily disassembled, right? It can be easily disassembled and used for some other purpose rather than disposing after using the product, right? And you can use salvaged materials in designing your products, right? In terms of material composition, you can use salvaged materials to manufacture your products, right? So likewise, such initiatives are there. Then the third one, IT and data management. A key competence is required to optimize resources. That is the ability to track products, components, and material data. Right? So there are material tracking technologies. Now this means this is also referred to as asset tracking, right? Now this includes monitoring the identity, the location, and the condition of certain individual components or products. By doing this, it can effectively extend the economic lifetime of products, right? So that it can bring benefits to companies and the consumers of those products as well, right? Now, for example, there are certain such conceptual asset tracking technologies that are being talked about in the world. For example, tracking of mobile phone, right? Now, if there is an ability to understand the behavior of the how or let's say understand or track the individual components of the phone, and also if by understanding what affects the physical condition of that mobile phone, right, further circular decision making can be enabled or facilitated. How does this happen? Now, by effectively using components, right, and by always trying to refurbish or say repair the components and reusing and recycling components, and trying to maintain the phone in an optimum way, right? So within this project that is proposed by a Dutch company called Fairphone, right? Fairphone is the service that they have proposed, right? Where they try to keep track of their products so that the materials within those products, the phones, right, they are circulating for as long as possible and at their highest possible value, right? So these tracking technologies can support this concept by trying to optimize preventive and also targeted maintenance, and also, like I mentioned, by enabling efficient reuse of components. For example, now this company has focused on the phone battery, for which an app has been created to read the most important metrics of the battery, right? The charging temperature, the total charge, and things like that. So this has allowed to the development of certain software instructions, right, in such a way that it can be ensured when it is needed to charge, and what is the optimum usage of the battery, right, and when to open the device and things like that, right? So that automatically such software instructions can be provided, right? So by tracking multiple components within a mobile phone, right, a lot of data can be gathered that can inform the future designs of the product as well, when we can identify how a particular consumer is using this product, right? If there are any mishaps, if there are any possibilities for this product to be easily discarded or the easily disposed, right? Such things can be understood, right? And things can be done at the product designing stage to increase the product lifespan, so that there's optimum usage that can be facilitated. And these instructions can be provided to the consumers as well. And in the material composition also certain changes can be done to optimize the services. So likewise, such tracking services are there, right? Then the next one, supply loops. What does it talk about? Now this is something you're familiar with. Turning toward the maximization of the recovery of one's own assets when they are profitable, and the maximization of the use of materials from recycling, components used to obtain additional value from the stream of products, components, and materials. So here you try to create supply loops by maximizing the use of the materials from recycling. You promote certain devices to be, or certain products or goods to be recycled as much as possible, and those materials are being used as much as possible to create more value proposition, more products or different products, right? And also maximization of the use of materials from components that are used to obtain additional value from a stream of products, right? Components or materials, this recycled paper, for instance, right? So there are many such initiatives in the world. You can also do internet searches on these concepts as well. Now, for polythene and plastic, right? Many types of garbage, it is there, right? Then strategic sourcing for own operations, building trusted partnerships and long-term relationships with suppliers and customers, including co-creation. So certain partnerships can be arrived at between organizations, right? And certain contracts can be created between them. Now here, for instance, there are in place these things called circular procurement frameworks, right? Circular procurement frameworks are there. So these things, they're actually built on these trusted partnerships, as this point itself also suggests. So what happens here is they provide an overview of the certain intervention points, right? That organizations can use to make their purchasing choices more circular in nature. And the type of partners they engage with in business are also following these circular business practices. And also they engage their suppliers in these kinds of circular business practice conversations, and they try to bring them into collaborative circular partnerships, right? So these types of discussions happen in the world, where they try to source from suppliers that incorporate circular economy principles across their entire sourcing activities, right? So these kinds of processes, they aim to educate on ideas for sourcing products and materials in a way that follows the best circular practices as possible, right? The best circular practices that are present, right? When, for instance, selecting such partners, businesses may consider facts such as how this business can combine the total cost in a circular economy when the value maximization factor is also incorporated, right? Not just the material cost, not just the regular product and process operational cost that we talk about, but also the economic cost, right? The value in terms of the economic cost also, how can be incorporated in this process, right? And how to create a negotiation environment which promotes innovations, right? In order to bring out new solutions to a circular economy, right? How to ensure within this contract that all the involved parties, for example, the suppliers involved in this contract, how to make sure that there is the best possible understanding between these parties on the circular economy and the available solutions for within their business processes to ensure a circular economy, so that both parties, the supplier and the procuring organization, is benefited, right? So how can trade-offs be created in a circular economy, right? Those things are in the modern world, they are being considered in these kinds of contracts and agreements. Then finally we talk about HR and incentives. What happens here? Change requires the appropriate adaptation of culture and the development of capabilities reinforced by training programs and rewards. So organizations which follow circular business models can incorporate incentives within their business practices to promote employees, or promote business units, promote certain functional areas which come up with circular business practices, right? They try to reward them or provide some sort of incentive so that such circular business ideas are being promoted within the business, right? So these are some of the ways how certain areas that can be considered on how to integrate circular business practices into the business models, right? So you all can also do further readings on these areas. So then this figure, next figure that we are going to discuss, figure 3.7, it talks about the change from traditional business models to circular business models to, from traditional business models to sustainable business models to circular business models. So the evolutionary change in designing business models also occurs from classical business models to sustainable business models to circular business models, according to the point that is being described. So here you can see what were the focus areas in these transitions. For example, in classical business models to sustainable business model, in this transition, what was in focus was mainly solutions for sustainability. From traditional business model, when people transcended to sustainable business model, they talked about how to create sustainable value, and also how to create proactive engagement from stakeholders, and the long-term perspective, how to consume resources in a sustainable way so that the future generations consumption is not hindered. Then when moving from sustainable business models to circular business models, the key focus area was in finding solutions for the circular economy, right? So what were the areas that were considered under this? How to close resource loops, as we talked about earlier, right? Reducing, reusing, recycling, right? Closing of resource loops. Then intensifying resource loops, dematerializing resource loops. We talked about this earlier. Then slowing of resource loops, right? How you can lengthen the life cycles, lengthen the consumption so that you can slow the resource consumption, slow the resource loops. Then narrowing the resource loops, right? Narrowing down resource consumptions and such, right? So these were the areas that were concerned when transitioning from these different business models to another, right? We have displayed this also for your further understanding. Then moving on, sustainable business model aims to ensure companies' ability to survive in the long term. Now, the survival in the long term was the key focus in sustainable business model, while maintaining its ability to achieve long-term value. So there was a long-term vision while sustaining the business, while achieving economic value, how to sustain value to the future generations. Then the circular business model aims to provide the ability to create a closed loop, which we talked about. What happens here is a closed loop means a cycle which aims mainly to fulfill the environmental assumptions and criteria in a new dimension of understanding this solution, right? While fulfilling the environment requirements, while considering the the ecological impacts, right? the circular business models try to close the loops. Then assumptions of the circular economy are based on the application of following 6 principles, right? Known as Resolve, introduced by Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So this foundation has introduced 6 principles coming under the abbreviation Resolve, which focuses on the assumption of the circular economy. So what are the assumptions based on? First one, regenerate, shifting to renewable energy and materials, reclaim, retain, and regenerate the health of ecosystems. Return recovered biological resources to the biosphere, right? So I'm not going to explain this in detail since we have already talked about these concepts earlier, right? So this is sort of a summary for you to understand the concepts around which the circular economy revolves. Then we talk about sharing. Keep product loop speed slow. Maximize utilization of products by sharing them among users. Reuse products throughout their technical lifetime. Prolong lifespan through maintenance, repair, and design of durability. Optimizing. What happens here? Increasing performance or efficiency of a product. Removing waste in production and the supply chain. Leverage big data, automation, remote sensing, steering. Loop. Keep components and materials in closed loops and prioritize inner loops. Virtualize. Deliver utility virtually, right? You can even virtualize consumptions now, so that you don't have to go to the entire scenario of producing physical products. If you can give virtual experiences to people, right? For example, in shopping and such, we have this virtualizing mechanisms of virtualizing, right? Virtualized shopping experiences, right? So how material usage altogether can be reduced. Then exchange. Replace old materials with advanced non-renewable materials. Apply new technologies, right? So these are some of the elements that can be considered under the circular business models, right? The literature recognizes digital business models and digital technologies as factors facilitating the transition to the circular economy. So when you, considering the entire discussion that we have considered so far, what you have to understand is that digital business models and digital technologies pave way for, or they provide better chances for business organizations in order to move towards the circular economy. They can be used to overcome challenges of the circular economy. Digitalization can boost the transformation towards a more sustainable circular economy, right? Like we talked about earlier, the tracking of materials and all those technologies. It can help to close the material loops by providing accurate information on the availability, location, and condition of products, right? The example which I related to you earlier. On tracking of assets, right? So that accurate information is available on the consumption of the product, where it is in the stage of, or the life cycle of the product, so that accurate information can be passed on. When to manufacture the product, how to manufacture the product, what material to be consumed, how to optimize the design of the product, right? So this all helps to close material loops. Digitalization also enables more efficient processes in companies, helps to minimize waste, promotes a longer life for products, and minimizes the transaction costs, right? We talked about how it can help to minimize waste in the earlier example that I related in the earlier point as well, and how longer life can be promoted, and also how transaction costs can be minimized, right? Maybe to source products, to obtain products, how technology can be used, right? How you can search for products online and find the most suitable supplier, minimize costs for sourcing and procuring materials, right? How technologies and procuring systems can be used, digital technologies can be used in order to minimize these costs, and how when you use technologies to track the maintenance of products and all that, right? How a lot of traveling cost, time cost, as well as costs on consuming resources such as energy for traveling can be reduced greatly, right? And you can think of many other ways how this helps to reduce the impact on the environment as well. Then we move to the last subtopic under this unit, stock indices in shaping the robust business models of the circular economy. In order to define mechanisms for developing the robustness of business models in the circular economy, stock exchange indexes can be used. Now, just like this stock indexes that we use in regular markets, right? In the circular economy also, certain indexes can be used, right? Circular economy indexes, right? There are many indexes used in the circular economy that focus on areas such as energy efficiency, new products and processes, production of natural resources, plastic waste issues, etc. So these indexes in the circular economy focus on how to reduce the impact on the ecological sphere, the environment, right? So these indexes can help to identify companies that facilitate the transition to a circular economy. So by using these indexes, now these indexes are increasingly being used in the global context, in developed countries especially, right? There are many companies which use these circular indexes. You can do an internet search on companies which are adopting these circular indexes as well. On the internet, there are so many examples of companies that have adopted circular economy indexes. So these companies, when companies adopt these kind of indexes, right, it helps to identify which sort of companies are trying to transition to circular business practices, right? While tackling the global resource challenge, such as energy scarcity, biodiversity loss, waste, and pollution. Also, they help to identify organizations that meet the criteria of these indexes, and they help to provide investors, right? Investors an idea of where they should invest in terms of value creation in the circular economy, right? When growth-oriented, sustainability-minded investors are being increasingly, growing in the modern world in the 21st century. So when companies adopt these kinds of circular indexes, it provides information for such investors also on where they should invest their money, right? What are the more sustainable businesses? What are the businesses in the circular economy? And what businesses are, practicing this kind of circular economy indexes? How they can look at business practices in a new perspective, right? How can they make their investment more worthwhile, more value adding to the world, right? To the environment, right? So we are going to look at one such type of exchange or stock exchange index or an circular economy index, which is referred to as the Sustainable Circularity Index, that is being proposed by Jablonski and Jablonski in 2020, which mainly considers 4 dimensions: the social, economic, environment, and the circular dimension, right? So so if we look at the table 3.2, right? Here, some of the example indicators of the social dimensions have been shown, right? So you can take a look at the social dimension where they look at the number of accidents per year, loss of efficiency by the organization, percentage of women employed by the organization, and the list goes on. And in the economic dimension, the direct economic value generated and distributed, expenses on research and development. Then the environmental dimension, there are certain example indicators such as hazardous waste, non-hazardous waste, and so on. In the circular dimension, we talk about input data in the production process, tools during the usage stage, right? Please make this table, actually it should be 3.2, right? It's a mistake. The table number should be 3.2. Please pay attention to that here. I will recorrect it in the handout. So these are some of the example indicators of the circular economy, sustainable circularity index. Also, they refer to it as the circular index, right? By Jablonski and Jablonski. So with that, let's take a look at a short video clip on these circular indexes, so that you gain a better understanding of why it is necessary and what are the objectives of these kinds of circular indexes. So sorry about there was some sort of interruption in the recording. I will replay it now.
Take, make, use. For years, the way our economy operates has remained unchanged. We take, make, use, and dispose. We reap materials from the planet, use them for a single life, and then discard them as waste. This is known as a linear economy. It not only puts pressure on land use, materials, and resources, but it has a harmful impact on our economy and our environment. We've reached a watershed moment in history. A linear economy no longer works. It's time to demand more, challenging the standards of what is acceptable for ourselves, our investments, and our planet. It is time for revolutionary thinking. Smarter processes, extended product life, and the useful application of waste can make change a reality. We all have a part to play in working together to reduce waste and harmful outputs. Accounting for material and resource flows and their associated system impacts will help redefine new ways of doing business, minimizing waste and maximizing resources. This new way of thinking leads to new questions. How will you respond to the shift to circular economy? How circular are your investments? Are your operations powered by renewable energy? Have you transitioned from a dependency on single-use plastics? All these questions need answers, and quickly. We can help. MSCI's newest suite of circular economy-related indexes and company-level exposure helps to inform you about your investments with a 360-degree view of the new landscape. In a world that's been challenged by climate change and resource scarcity, how ready are you to transition to a circular economy?
So that particular video was shared by MSCI, organization who specializes in this kind of circular economy related business practices, advisory services. They have provided their own circular indexes, right? They have their own indexes which are being used by different business organizations. So when you have time, you can refer to these kinds of things and add to your knowledge as well, because this kind of subject is not something that we can actually fully teach in the class. There are so much information that you should explore and learn yourself as well, right? So with that in mind, hereby we are concluding our chapter number 5, our unit 5, which focused on new economy business models. We talked about the concepts of open data, big data, sharing economy, and circular economy as well. So hope you have gotten a new perspective to the economics now, rather than the traditional economics that you know. We hope that you are expanding your knowledge on these new concepts of economies. And with that, with the hope of meeting you all with a new chapter as well. So at this point, we are winding up the class. So thank you for joining, and stay safe, everyone.